There is a photograph that has been circulating quietly on social media for the past few weeks. Not a staged one. Not a palace-approved release with soft lighting and careful angles. This one was taken by a volunteer at a community well-being center in Essex, a slightly blurred shot, phone camera, bad overhead lighting, and it shows Princess Catherine sitting in a plastic chair, the kind that stacks in a gymnasium, leaning forward with both elbows on her knees. She is not performing. That's the thing. She is just leaning in, listening to a woman across from her, and her face is doing something that faces do when they recognize something true. That photograph broke something open in people. Because the woman she was listening to had just finished describing what it felt like when her hair fell out in the shower. The clumps. The drain. The way she stood there for a long time afterward, not moving, just looking at the water running clear again like nothing had happened. And Catherine, the Princess of Wales, the future Queen of England, the woman who had been photographed in Dior and Alexandrite earrings at Buckingham Palace garden parties, just nodded. Not a polished, empathetic nod. A slow one. A knowing one. Yeah. I know exactly what that drain looks like. Nobody expected her to come back the way she did. When Catherine publicly confirmed her cancer diagnosis in March of 2024, the world sort of held its breath. Cancer. The Princess of Wales. Two things that didn't seem to belong in the same sentence. She had undergone abdominal surgery in January, initially believed to be routine, the palace had said. Precautionary. Then, the word came. Cancer cells. Preventative chemotherapy. Step back from public life. Rest. People worried. You could feel it in the way strangers talked about her, in the comments sections under old photos, in the flowers left outside Kensington Palace by people who had never met her and never would. There was something personal about the worry, which is strange when you think about it, worrying about someone who doesn't know your name, who lives behind iron gates and attends events you'll only ever see on television. But grief and fear have their own logic, and people had watched her for over a decade, at her wedding, at 3 births, at every Christmas service in those perfect coats and that steady, warm smile. She had become a fixed point. And then, she wasn't there. The months she spent in treatment were almost entirely private. No updates except the ones that needed to be given. No photographs except the ones she chose to release, a handful, careful, quiet. One showed her in a field in Norfolk, walking. Another showed her with her children, laughing at something off camera, the late summer light going gold around all of them. People saved those photographs on their phones. Not as celebrity content. As something more like reassurance. She completed chemotherapy in September 2024. Her statement said the cancer journey was complex, scary and unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you. She said she had come face to face with her own vulnerabilities. She said it had given her a new perspective on everything. She signed off, "Out of darkness can come light, so let that light shine bright." Fans read it like a letter from someone they loved. Then, in January 2025, came the news most people had been quietly praying for. Remission. She was in remission. The relief was enormous and immediate, the kind that makes people cry at their phones in traffic and at kitchen tables and in office bathrooms. Strangers celebrated online with the enthusiasm of people celebrating news about their own families. Because in some quiet, impossible to explain way, she had become that. But remission, as Catherine herself would later say, is not the same as normal. You put on a sort of brave face, stoicism through treatment. Treatment's done, then, it's like, I can crack on, get back to normal. But, actually, the phase afterwards is really, really difficult. She said this not in a prepared address, not in a statement filtered through a press office. She said it standing in a hospital well-being garden, in conversation with a group of patients, in the particular voice people use when they stop performing courage and just describe what actually happened. That voice is what broke people open. The Royal Marsden Hospital in London is where Catherine received her chemotherapy. When she returned in January 2025, not as a patient but as someone in remission, someone who had made it, staff lined the corridors. Royal photographer Chris Jackson, who was there to document the visit, later described the scene on a podcast. "The staff were packed in," he said. "Excited. Waiting. And a particular woman reached out and gave Catherine a big hug, and Catherine let her. That was the thing he noticed. She let her. No protocol. No careful management of the interaction. Just two people who had both spent time in the same difficult world, holding on to each other for a moment. She was listening to everything they had to say," Jackson said. And she was. That was the part that kept surfacing in every account, in every description from people who were there. The listening. Not the kind of listening that is really just waiting to respond. The kind that sits with you. The kind that costs something. She had brought something with her too, though the palace never made any formal announcement about it. Word traveled the way word does in hospitals, person to person, quietly. Catherine had written handwritten notes to patients who were currently undergoing chemotherapy. Personal ones. Not form letters. Notes that referenced specific things, a particular fear that someone had shared, a difficult week that had been described in a letter sent to the palace. She had read the letters people sent her. All the letters people sent her during treatment, from strangers who were sick themselves, from mothers writing on behalf of daughters, from children who drew pictures because they didn't have the words. She had read them, and she had kept them, and she had written back to some of them, and when she walked back into the Marsden it was with the weight of all of those names still on her. One woman, a 54-year-old named Margaret who had been midway through her own chemotherapy course, received a note. She didn't talk about it publicly for weeks. She kept it folded in the drawer of her hospital bedside table. She told her daughter, who told a friend, who eventually, carefully, shared part of the story, not the note's contents, just the fact of it. Just the fact that Catherine had taken the time to find the specific thread of this one woman's fear and speak directly to it, in her own handwriting, while she herself was navigating what came after. "That's what broke me," Margaret's daughter said. "Not that a princess wrote to my mum. That a sick person, someone who was still healing herself, thought to reach for someone else's hand." The dress alteration story came out around the same time and broke people in a different way. It was quiet news, the kind that surfaces through fashion journalists and then spreads because it lands somewhere tender. During a public appearance in 2024, Catherine had worn a made-to-order dress, customized in a way that only became clear when someone looked closely. The neckline had been adjusted. Subtly. Just enough to conceal her chemotherapy port. A portacath is a small device placed under the skin, a medical shortcut, essentially, a semi-permanent line that allows treatment to be administered directly without repeated needle insertions into a vein. Practical. Necessary. And visible, as a slight raised disc beneath fabric, if the fabric isn't right. She had her dress made to cover it. Not because she was ashamed. That's the important part, that's the part people got right when they talked about it. But because she was still showing up. Because she had decided that public life, even reduced public life, even carefully managed public life, was part of who she was. And so she put on the adjusted dress and she walked into the event and she stood and spoke and smiled and held it together. The port was still there under the fabric. She was still there under the princess. And later, when treatment was finally done and a doctor told her she could have it removed, she admitted she'd hesitated. "I got so attached to it," she said, and laughed a little, and the people in the room laughed with her, and there was something enormous in that laughter: relief, absurdity, survival, the strange intimacy of a body that had been through something and come off the other side still yours. There is a woman in one of those small Essex towns who watched the video Catherine posted on World Cancer Day, the one released in early 2025, featuring footage from her Royal Marsden visit, filmed with the specific intention of being felt rather than watched. This woman had been diagnosed 8 months earlier. She was midway through her own treatment. She was, in her own words, running on fumes and stubbornness, held upright by the particular exhaustion of people who have decided not to fall yet. She said she was just scrolling. Late at night. Too tired to sleep, too wired on medication to do anything productive. And the video appeared and she pressed play mostly because she needed something to put on while she stared at the ceiling. And then, she watched it. And, Catherine said, on those bad days you feel weak, tired, and you have to give in to your body resting. She said it like a woman who knew exactly what a bad day looked like from the inside. But, on the good days, when you feel stronger, you want to make the most of feeling well. The woman in Essex paused the video. She sat with that for a long time. Then, she cried, not the overwhelming, breaking down kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when something you thought only you knew about yourself turns out to be said out loud by someone else. I felt like she was talking directly to me, she said. Like she had been in the same room I'd been in. The same 3 a.m. room where you bargain with yourself just to make it to morning. And, that's the thing about what Catherine did, not just the handwritten notes, not just the careful dress, not just the return to the Marsden and the listening and the corridor lined with people who had cared for her and wanted to see her alive and standing. It was the whole of it together. The decision to not just survive quietly but to turn back around, while still healing, and speak plainly about what surviving actually cost. She could have come back in the polished way. The graceful return, the careful statements, the return to duties, the she's looking well coverage and the slow reassertion of royal normalcy. Nobody would have blamed her for it. She had earned that particular form of privacy. Instead she sat in a plastic chair in Essex and leaned forward with her elbows on her knees and listened to a woman describe a shower drain. And the woman felt less alone. The photograph is still circulating. The blurry one, bad lighting, plastic chairs. People keep sharing it without much comment. Sometimes with just one word. This. Because some gestures are too complete to explain. They just land. They do what they came to do and then they sit there quietly inside you and you carry them forward without being entirely sure why they weigh what they weigh. Catherine is in remission. She is, by all accounts, in good health. She is finding her new normal, which she described not as a destination but as an ongoing negotiation with a body and a life that have both changed and kept going. She still shows up. Adjusted necklines and all. And, somewhere in Essex, a woman who was running on fumes and stubbornness made it to morning. Then, made it to the next one.